Hello, this is a video on creating custom attenuation shapes in Unreal Engine 5. So this is a scenario that we've got. We've got a little maze here that our player needs to run around, and when they run across this first corridor, they come upon this vending machine where they could get a fizzy drink of whatever they want, which gives them some kind of status update, increases their health, something like that. And we've got a sound on the vending machine, which is just a looping mechanical sound, and an attenuation on it, which is this box that you can see here. So we'll spawn in and we'll run over to our vending machine and it's buzzing away. We'll carry on around this maze to the other side of the wall, and we can still hear it buzzing from the other side of the wall. So this is a very rudimentary just test case of a scenario that I've got in another project. And I know that for the solution to this, anybody familiar with audio dev will be saying occlusion. Occlusion is the answer. But for this scenario, I'm going to need sounds down each of these corridors, and I don't want a complex occlusion system for it. So a suitable solution seemed to be just change the attenuation shape. So the reason why we can hear it the other side of the wall is we're in the fall off zone of this box here. But I've created another attenuation shape, which is called elongated. And with this one, as you can see, if I change the fall off distance here, you can see it's only increasing on the x-axis. We can increase the inner radius of the z and the y by just increasing those still here. That makes it bigger or taller rather. And then on the y-axis, we can increase that and make it wider. So now let's spawn in and see how that's changed it. Run up to our vending machine, and as before, still hear it buzzing away. And then we're going to walk over here, go on the other side of the wall. And because we're not in that fall off zone or the inner radius, we can't hear it the other side of the wall anymore. So that's the custom attenuation, and I'll go over the code and I'll show you how I've implemented that. Okay, so there's 4 different CPP files that we need to amend to add our custom attenuation. So I'll go through them one by one now. And the first one that we'll go over is the attenuation. So this is the header file, and this is the attenuation shape that you'll select in the attenuation asset. So we need to add a new option here for our new attenuation. So you can see I've added elongated to that enum, and then going over to the attenuation implementation file. If we go to this function, which is evaluate, so this is evaluating the attenuation multiplier based on the enum that you've got selected. So you can see you've got the ones that default with the sphere, the box, and the capsule, the cone here. So I've added a new case in this switch for elongated. So then if we go to this function here that I've created, so I started off by just copying over the attenuation for the box and then amending it for what I needed. So if we jump over to that function, so this is where we're calculating what the multiplier should be for that sound. So I won't go over every bit of this, but you can probably, if you're familiar with code, you can probably make out what it's doing. So if the player's location is above the z extents or greater than the y, then we'll return 0. And then if that's not true, if the player is less than the x extents, then we'll return 1 because they're inside the inner radius. And then if that's not true, then we'll go to this attenuation eval function, which will calculate the volume for the distance between the inner radius and the max fall off. So that's the attenuation file, and that's the main calculations that are happening for figuring out how loud the sound should be. So next we'll go over to the attenuation settings customization. So this is, if we jump over to the project and open this attenuation here, bring that across. So if you've got the capsule selected, the options disappear for the extents, but then if we select elongated again, you can see that this option reappears, and this is what this CPP file is handling. So this visibility here is based on if the attenuation extents handle should be visible or not. This used to be just is box selected. So because I needed the same extents visible for if the box were selected, I've just changed this to is box or elongated selected. So we can find if that's selected via this function here, and yeah, that's just a small amendment to that. So we show the extents. Then next is the component visualizer. So if I go over to this visualizer here, this is showing the inner radius and the fall off of the attenuation when you're editing it in the editor and you're not in a plain editor session. So again, if I come back to the project, I'll show you what I mean by that. So we'll select our sound here. So it's these lines that you can see. So if I pull this down and then change the fall off, so it's that visualizer there that you're seeing. This is the code that's handling that. So it's just in this function for draw visualization. I've just added again another case to this switch for elongated, and we're calculating the inner radius box and the fall off box for that. And then the last one to bear in mind is the audio debug. So if I go back to the project again, this is one that would be easy to overlook because maybe it's not used so much, I don't know, in people's implementation process. I'm not sure how many people use this debug, but if I jump in to the wall here and then put in the command for attenuation au.3dvisualize.attenuation1. So then you can see it there. You can see the blue lines for the debug. If I were to go to the ends of it, you should be able to see the fall off at the ends of it as well. So it's when you're playing in editor or development build, you can see the lines of the attenuation. So the code for that is very similar to the visualizer. So again, I've just added a switch for the elongated option and the necessary changes to the code for that. And that's it for custom attenuations in UE5.